Terrarian in the Dungeon, Chapter 12, Fan Fiction by Azazyel. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of his stories. Freya POV. Freya was stumped, she was bamboozled, she was baffled, bewildered, befuddled, dazed, and most importantly confused. Freya wasn't a goddess so easily perplexed by anything after the many millennia she had lived. Freya lay there on her lounging sofa overlooking the city and watched her newest enigma go about his day doing errands for his lazy ineffectual goddess. But she had no idea what the hell she was looking at. Bel Cranel's soul was blinding purity in its innocence, and such purity could be polished evermore. Which was why she had been considering throwing challenges in his wake to push him ever further. But this newcomer, this Jake Barris, she only saw in her guise as seer, and finally captured the sight beyond the outer shell of his soul. Such filth, such depravity. Yet such overwhelming purity that it will enforce a stillness of order that which is death. Freya muttered as she used her divine mirror to gaze upon Azazyel remotely. Like a connoisseur of painting art, she had to pause and literally drown herself in the endless beautiful vistas within the young man's souls and the equal horror-filled landscapes that she had to gaze upon equally to get the full picture. "My lady?" Otter spoke with a questioning tone, but the giant of a man dashed forward to check upon his goddess as Freya's wine chalice slipped out of her hand when she used both hands to cup the mirror. "Where did he go?" Freya all but screamed as her viewing session was torn apart like she was being deeply absorbed in the middle of the movie's climax and someone just rips the TV's cable out. Otter looked into the divine mirror and saw how Jake Barris had entered an alley, and even as the mirror panned over to keep the young man in view, the young man literally disappeared into thin air, with the alley having no such obstructions that could have hosted a tunnel or something that would allow him to hide. "Lady Freya, relax." Otter's deep voice reverberated, and Freya took a deep breath as she calmed down her overly stimulated emotions. "Lady Freya, please look upon his goddess's home, I have a theory." After a moment of hesitation, Freya did so. The Queen of Azazyel didn't fear discovery and getting in trouble with the guild. But she did have to respect Seshet as a god who reveled in magic, craftsmanship, and most importantly rituals, and had, like many other deities, skirted the rules when it came to using their arcanum, so her little abode was just as protected as her folkvaner filled with all its adventurers. Within moments Freya had reoriented her divine mirror's gaze upon Seshet's workshop, and lo and behold, easily visible through the cat goddess's sunning room's windows, was Jake Barris hiding behind a small hill of pillows of cushions that he was using as cover for his duel against his weird squirrel summons, in a pitch pillow fight that sent said pillows careening into one another at speeds that even level 2s would nod in respect at. "That squirrel reminds me of Ratatoskr. He gave my pantheon back in Tenkai many a headache. Hell, he even stole Heimdall's Hornjullerhorn and almost started Ragnarok when he ran around all sides of the Norse pantheon blowing the damn thing as hard as it could." Freya spoke with a haunted tone to her voice as she watched the damned mirror of the squirrel that gave her pantheon sneak a massive acorn into a wadded-up pillow and knock Jake over as the pillow unfolded mid-flight, sending the acorn right into Jake's head. "My lady, shouldn't you focus on how he teleported back home? Isn't teleportation the domain only the gods could have in Tenkai, and only in the dire needs Hermes could down here in Genkai?" Otter questioned, bringing Freya's mind back into order. Freya silently nodded but looked into Jake as he repeatedly summoned his squirrel at the roof of the room, so the squirrel was caught in an endless loop of falling. She couldn't find whatever magical implement that allowed him to teleport across Azazyel and not trip every god's senses for the spatial distortion such a thing would undoubtedly cause. For the next half an hour, Freya merely watched Jake talk to his goddess, and although the way the normally so calm and collected Seshet was being driven to chase around the young man and his squirrel riding his shoulders made her chuckle, she had to raise an eyebrow as Seshet took out an obviously pre-prepared signboard. "It's a pity I cannot hear what is happening through my divine scrying mirror. But in the end, we merely need to go to the shop in the morning." Freya smiled as she read the signboard and had to chuckle as she realized the young man was going to be swamped, as even with his low level, his odd actions within and outside the dungeon have already alerted elements within the city that would be very interested in seeing what he could offer. Whether they could just buy or just take such treasures off his corpse made little difference to some people. Freya's eyes stared at the sign that went below Seshet's shop sign and committed it to memory, as she knew the store was going to be the center of Azazyel's next little bit of hubbub. "The Terrarian's inventory." "Otter," Freya spoke up. "Bel's progress has slowed. Unleash that minotaur that we discussed with you to begin training." Granted, Freya hadn't given Bel his gift in the grimoire yet. But a true hero and a man worthy of being her soul mate needed to be above all others. He could do without it, and beating the minotaur, whom her dear Otter had trained, would be a wonderful reason to gift him the grimoire afterwards. Yes, my lady. Shall I post myself close to the battle? Even with his talent and progress, the Minotaur I have trained has slain a number of adventurers and has since mutated into a full aberrant. Bell likely won't be able to defeat it as a middling level one. I couldn't defeat it at such a level. Otter frankly admitted, and Freya paused as she pondered over her most faithful servant's warning. No, Otter. If he is to be worthy of my eternal love, he will overcome such a hurdle. Freya said confidently and with finality as she glanced over at little Hestia's little church, and her eyes tightened seeing the shameless form of Hestia herself slipping out of her bed to crawl into the couch that Bell was sleeping within. I will begin the preparations then, Otter said as he turned to do just that, as getting such a dangerous aberrant down into the 6th or 7th floor where Bell had been fighting as of late would be troublesome, as he would need to muzzle and only release the Minotaur when one of his familia members gave the signal. I want magma armor as well, Gareth demanded, and Loki's face twitched at the sight of her normally gruff and easygoing dwarf executive being so demanding. No, this was literally the only time Gareth had demanded anything at all. Well, that wasn't just raising the alcohol budget with each of his level-ups to get past his ever-rising endurance stat. Bah, what the hell good is magma armor good for anyway? Would he even be able to make the armor in your size, you fat dwarf, haha? Bet Loga yelled out laughing, but then such laughter was abruptly cut short as Gareth threw his tankard so hard into the werewolf's face that it deformed on impact and knocked the werewolf's chair over with the werewolf with it. The room was filled with the Loki executives and were supposed to be going over the details for their upcoming expedition, but nope, Gareth and Bet had been arguing about trying to find out the new kid on the block that had been running around in enchanted armor and was seen going in and out of the dungeon with unseen before tamed monsters. Enough. Riveria finally snapped, shutting the two up as she had noticed Ace had given up on the meeting and had mentally checked out to just munch on the fried potato snacks she adored. Thank you, Riveria, Finn said after he coughed and tapped some papers he had on his side of the large circular meeting room table. I will just say that is one of, if not the strongest familia here in Orario. That coercing such a new adventure, even if he has an interesting crafting system, could be seen as us taking the same path of being the overlord of Orario, and none of us want to deal with the hate and constant attempts to sabotage our familia that Hera and Zeus had to deal with when they loved to interfere with other familias. Finn explained logically, and everyone nodded, with Ace nodding with her Jagamarukan bobbing with the motion. Finn gave Gareth a look and then spoke. Gareth, you have been spending 30% of your armor and weapon funds on alcohol, so you are free to use the millions of valis you waste on exorbitantly expensive booze to commission armor or whatever you want. Just don't come off as strong-arming him, as attempting to bully a talented craftsman is a good way to get Orario's blacksmiths to blackball you, as we all know. Finn finished with Gareth chuckling at the memory of one of Freya's little pets stealing some super expensive bauble for her goddess, and for a week the Freya familia was blackballed by all the craftsmen of Orario until Freya herself apologized for the girl's actions. People like to look at Freya and Loki's familia as the lifeblood and back that held up Orario's economy and was the end-all, be-all, that dictated how the world spun. But the truth was absolutely not the case.